My co-pilot is Dr. Paul Green. I'm very honored to introduce him today, and let's have fun. Dr. Paul Michael Green. Paul?
Jay, thank you for that extremely short introduction. Anyways, normally I would have introduced me, but Jay did a good job. You met my wife. I also have with her my cousin, Mayoral Clark Redmond. Raise your hand. The daughter of Bill and Rosalie Clark. And her husband, Rick Redmond. Rick, raise your hand. And a few other North Shore notables. We also have here a former mayoral candidate, Don Hyder. Where are you? Raise your hand. There he is. Sitting next to Roebling. That 87 bond can never be broke. All right. So, and of course, my own dean from the Roosevelt University, Lynn Weiner, and the Roosevelt table. I will be on my best behavior, which for most of you means probably nothing. All right. Here we go. As the great Betty Davis would say, buckle your seatbelts. Okay. There is going to be an election on the February 22nd. For those of you chronologically challenged, that of course used to be George Washington's birthday. So what we have now, before we go into the breakdown, and we'll go through the little handout I have, and we'll also have, for those of you who want the complete printed copy of the analysis of the 2010 election, given this vast crowd, I couldn't bring one for everybody. We'll have anyone who wants one, we'll have a little Chicago pop quiz. And those of you who get it right can get one of these very hard to get desirable printouts. By the way, if you have any questions for me, you have a form on your table. Make sure it's legible and make sure it's favorable. Okay, here we go. If this was the old system, this race would be over. As you know, in the mid-90s, in Springfield, otherwise known as the Republican interregnum, when the Republicans controlled everything, they changed the system by which you elect a mayor. The notion behind it was that somehow if you make it nonpartisan, like the aldermanic races, you would get a Republican to run. Today, we have no Democrats or Republicans running. They're all nonpartisan. We know that. That's the way it should be. But that would have been over, because in '83, those of you who can go back that far, Harold Washington won the greatest Democratic primary of all time with 36% of the vote. I don't think there's any doubt that Rahm Emanuel is going to be the #1 vote getter. The point that I'll be making, probably ad nauseum, is that the race on Tuesday is not between Emanuel and the other three major candidates. The race is really between Rahm Emanuel and 50% plus one. That is the contest. And so what we have then is that we have I called it a pas de deux yesterday to one of the reporters. We have a dance for two. Is that right, Marilee? There you go, pas de deux. What we have now is that we have candidates running against each other, ganging up on Rahm, if you saw our debate on Monday night at the TTW. But also, they have to gang up on each other, but much more delicately. And so this pains me to say this because Dawn Clark-Netsch knows I don't like to change my views. I've been giving the same speech on redistricting for 30 years. But I have to do it now. Because one of my favorite lines about politics is there's no such thing as a silver medal. You either win or you lose. Well, in this election, there could possibly be a reward for the silver medal. Coming in second, and if Rahm Emanuel doesn't get 50% plus one, you're in the playoffs. And so what you have is a two-way race. They're running against Rahm, and they're running against each other. As for Rahm, he's just running against 50% plus one. And so I think that is something that, if there's a framework for what I'm saying, that's the one that really matters the most. And we'll talk about strategy in a couple of minutes. General point number 3, the campaign that is going so far has really worked in Emanuel's favor. First, you had, starting with the mayor announcing in early September that he was not running, you had and I use this phrase knowingly, the idiotic residency fight. It was perhaps, you know, something, I have called it the equivalent of the Inquisition, though Joe Morris would never be noted for, as a Torquemada figure, but nevertheless, if you went there and saw what was going on, you would swear that perhaps George III wasn't all that bad. So what I would suggest to you, what that did do was that delayed the campaign because everybody was involved in, and then of course the various going through the court system, led by the appellate court, and merit selection of judges really is important, but we'll go beyond that. So that was a big help to Emanuel because it just took it off the pages, and you had the renegade Renner who wanted to run for mayor, and people were actually covering him as a mayoral candidate based that he is leasing or renting a house of a real candidate. And you think the media knows what it's doing. The renegade Renner who was making up stories about a grandfather or an uncle, a guy named Prendergast, who, the only Prendergast I know, that was the guy who shot Carter Harrison the first in 1893. But I checked him out. He was a minor politician. But he was getting coverage like he was a real candidate. That stalled the campaign for at least a month. Then you had Carol Braun giving the missteps, to quote the great poem, The Rape of the Lock. Who breaks a butterfly on a wheel? Someone attacking someone with 1% of the vote. That you just don't do that, right, Bernie? It's a waste. I mean, what are you going to gain? 7 votes? Which also helped Emanuel because that got all the coverage. Then, of course, the snow, and let the record show, for those of us somewhat chronologically challenged, 1967 and 1979 were far worse than 2011. And both those years, by the way, were mayoral election years. One, the incumbent won every ward, Richard J. Daley, probably thanks to Mr. McDonough. And in 79, Jane Byrne lost. Won and beat Mike Bolandic, who lost based on the snow. So, the mayoral marathon has turned into a sprint. However, for those of you who like your politics vis-a-vis the Marcus of Queensberry rules, in Chicago, Marcus of Queensberry rules, for politics, you wear your trunks around your ankles. There are no low blows. I think the next 4 or 5 days are going to be spectacular. We're going for it now. And I think all bets are off, and for those of you who've been in politics, especially in a tight election, and though Emanuel has a big lead, remember, it's really tight at 50% plus 1. The last weekend of the campaign is the most crucial. This is where you build up the momentum. This is where you see what's going on. Now, one more general point, and we'll get to the strategies. On your, I always say desk. This time I make that. I'm sorry I didn't make enough green copies of this, but one of the reports the Institute for Politics did at Roosevelt, we do an analysis of every election. And one of the things that is quite striking, and when I give you the early voting returns, which I do have, by the way, you never ask why or you never ask how. You will see it verifies what I'm about to say. During those terrible 1980s, we had with council wars and all the other stuff where you had total race-based voting. You had giant turnout wards on the northwest and southwest side, white ethnic wards that were huge. You could look at those numbers yourself, and it was just there. What has happened demographically in Chicago has enormous political consequences. The census data that just came out 2 days ago, which really makes this report, I was really thrilled that they did it then instead of tomorrow, shows quite clearly that the northwest and southwest side, especially the southwest side, no longer, except for Beverly, no longer holds the kind of power. The old basis of the 11th Ward with the Daleys and the 13th Ward with the Madigan and the 14th Ward with the Burke, those wards simply do not have the people to turn out the votes. It's as simple as that. In the 2010 election, my pal Ed Burke's ward had the 3rd lowest turnout. You know, 10 precincts in the 19th ward outvoted the 14th ward. So what you have then is that you have a shift. Where is the shift taking place? The North Lakefront and the South Loop. The mightiest ward now is Brendan Riley's 42nd ward. It will have the highest turnout. It will have an incredible number of votes. But up and down the North Lakefront, 42, 43, 44, including 46. If you read Time Out this week, you see the changing 46th ward, 48, and, ready for this one? The collar wards, 32, 47, next to the lakefront. They are suddenly filled with people who vote. And so we are going to have a major demographic shift from northwest, southwest to the lakefront. The other area still remains, excuse me, a powerful vote producer, and those are the middle class south side black wards. 6, 8, 21, 34. Even without the leadership that they once had, Gene Sawyer from the 6th, John Stroger from the 8th, Wilson Frost from the 34th, 21st never really had much leadership, but they all turned out to vote. Middle class people vote, and middle class African Americans vote like middle class people. So what we are going to see demographically in this city, and the usual cop-out is when, not that I would ever do it on WGN, well, we have to see where the vote is coming from. That means I don't know what the hell's going on. Sorry, that's the old cop-out. Or when people say, that's really interesting, which is the equivalent of clearing your throat. So what I do see happening is that I do see the lakefront becoming extremely important now, far more than in the Dawn Clark Netch days where it was the balance of power. It's now the major player, one of the two major players. In fact, will probably outproduce the middle-class black South Side wards in this election. So with that going on, and with all of that energy there, let's try and see the strategies for all 4 of the major candidates. And yes, so just so you all know, primo veritas, I don't duck it. I was the guy behind the notion that if you don't get 5% in a poll, the Tribune poll, you don't debate. You know, if we have debates up here with 6 or 7 candidates, they're not debates. It's basically reading your little, or memorizing your 30-second answers. And so both the Tribune debate, which we sponsored, and the TTW debate, the rule was you had to be 5%. And I just believe debates for running for important offices should be between people who have a chance of winning. Remember, watch this, it wasn't Lincoln, Douglas, Smith, and Jones. All right. That's my best line, by the way. Margaret, it ain't gonna get any better. All right, here we go. Emmanuel, he is run as the incumbent from the very beginning. As I said, remember I said ad nauseum, he is running not against 3 major opponents, he's running against 50% plus 1. And here's where it gets interesting. If he is denied 50% plus 1, then you have the potential for a real race, because it will demonstrate, without doing fuzzy math, that the majority of the people who voted in the first round voted against him, or else he'd have got 50% plus 1. Just like Gary Chico, I also went to Chicago Public Schools. I can do the math. So, darn right. So when you look at that, he really has to go all out. Not that he can't win a runoff, because he's going to have the highest number of votes. But, you know, my old friend Aldo DeAngelis used to say the highest form of democracy is when you're running unopposed. Aldo was a great Democrat with a small d and a big Republican. Not so big. But the bottom line is you want to end it as fast as you can. So here's what I think how he wins. 1, he piles up huge margins in his own congressional district on the north lakefront and what remains of the northwest side. He gets whatever there is to get on the southwest side, though I think now that's going to be a little more difficult in the 2 big turnout wards that are left. That's the Beverly, the 19th, and the 23rd with the Lipinski family. I think now that's going to be somewhat more difficult. And he has to do much better than expected in the Hispanic wards, which have the lowest number of votes. Most Hispanic voters do not live in the so-called Hispanic wards. They live on the northwest and southwest sides. In fact, for the first time, obviously for the first time, in the 45th ward, the ward that Tom Lyons used to run, Mr. LeVar has endorsed a Mexican-American for alderman. in the 45th Ward. So times have changed dramatically, and he also has to show the kind of strength he's had, at least in the polling, in the African-American wards. If he can do that, but his key is the North, Lakefront, North, his old congressional district, stretching all the way across the city. If he can get the big margins there, he'll have a chance for a one-round knockout. Chico. Gary Chico is running a very good campaign as the alternative. What he needs to do, or what he needs to happen, is to have Emmanuel make a huge last-second mistake, which is probably doubtful, or Emmanuel hurt by some shocking, underlined, last weekend media discovery. You know, those last-second things do happen. Remember, the 2000 election for president, Bush was doing extremely well until it came out that he had a drunk driving thing on the last weekend of the campaign, which cost him, according to Karl Rove, over 2 or 3 million evangelical votes. Now, Ron probably wouldn't do well with the evangelicals, so we're not going to go there. But I'm on record on that one. But if something comes out, I think that would really make a possibility, not for him to beat Emmanuel, but to hold him under 50% plus one. And that's where Chico must go. And in order for Chico to do that and come in second, remember, all three of these guys, Chico, Braun, and Del Valle, they're running against each other as well as against Emmanuel, keeping him for 50% plus one. He has to get in second. He has to show better than expected lakefront support. The two big unions that have endorsed him, police and fire, have to come out for him. And Del Valle has to do very badly in the Hispanic wards. I think if all those things happen, he has a chance to stop Emmanuel. But it really depends on what Emmanuel does, because there's just no way he can outvote Emmanuel on February 22nd. Now, the point of the pas de deux, if you saw our debate Monday night, Del Valle threw a little lobbed a grenade over to Chico on the HDO, Hispanic Democratic Organization, which, by the way, and now in Chicago, you may not know this, watch this one, you may not know this, but we've changed the alphabet. 23 letters. There's no H, there's no D, and there's no O. It never existed. How can you have a Hispanic Democratic Organization? We only had 23 letters. That organization was very, very powerful in many of these wards. One of the aldermen, who will be nameless, had nothing but profanity to explain it. They were very tough, but Chico didn't know anything about it, though he was chief of staff. So, I mean, those are the things but Del Valle did that, not because he's whatever. He just wants to hope for a miracle to leapfrog over Chico and Braun. Carol Braun. She needs, hey, guys, I'm playing this straight. Now, our former good friend Jeff Berkowitz would cringe at this. Remember, I'm the white line down the middle of the road. She needs a huge black turnout, and she has to get the overwhelming percentage of those votes, because she is not going to do very well in any other part of the city. Back in '83, Harold Washington had the 80-80 mantra. He wanted an 80% turnout in the black wards and an 80% support for him. He didn't quite make 80% turnout, but he went over the 80% for him. And I think that is something which she can't get to, but remember, all she does is to come in second place. If this happens, and by chance she does come in second, she then has to try and unify the anti-Emmanuel voters, run as a reformer with a heart, and yes, as my wife says, and run as the woman candidate. It's a long shot. To be blunt, it's a long shot. Carol Feisenthal writes for the Chicago Magazine. I was on with Bruce DeMont on a program, and she wrote this blog calling Carol Braun's campaign the most inept campaign ever. And I said, that's a tough thing to say in Chicago. I mean, the competition is fierce. But the campaign is just, from the very beginning, it just hasn't been good. And that taking on that woman at 1% was just politically nonsense. Number 4, Miguel Del Valle. Mr. Nataris, I work alone. All right. Miguel Del Valle needs a miracle. He has the least money, least organization, the least name recognition. To get into the runoff, he needs a combination of events equal to a political perfect storm. Obviously, Emmanuel has to go below 50. Chico must stumble, or some of his supporters may say things that are really stupid, and Braun just simply self-destructs. I don't see how he comes in second, but I also was the person who in 1979 said Jane Byrne would be lucky if she wins 5 wards. And there are still bastards out there that remind me of that. Pardon my language. I could have gone worse. So he needs to literally be run as the kind of reformer, the kind of campaign that the former Inspector General Hoffman was going to run before he became a lawyer at Sidley and Austin. Now, what are the political intangibles? Number one, field organization. I know in this day of high tech with those 30-second commercials, who in the hell needs field organization? If you're an old Chicagoan, you know what that was like. The precinct captain would have 10 people working for them. 4 o'clock, the cards would come out. You haven't voted yet. Too bad Ed's not here. But when when Billy Singer was running for alderman for the first time in the 44th Ward, and my old pal Ed Mazer, one of our board members, was working for Bill, and this lady said, I can't vote because it was late. He had her name as a plus, and he had to come out, because I'm making chicken soup. And Ed Mazer said, no problem, I'll stir, you vote. True story. I mean, that's called field organization, and Ed will vouch for that. But troops in the field really do matter. And who's going to have the people out there to, not necessarily like the old days are gone, but to get your pluses out, especially in areas where you expect to do well. 2, though this is the age of reform, is Cindy here? She was here yesterday. Okay, good. In the old days, we used to call it wham. Walking around money, Senator Berman. Breakfast, lunch, little chocolates, and perhaps a few other things. That will be important too. Allies, which of these aging ward committeemen or ward pauls will really get to deliver, and then of course to get out to vote. I firmly believe that bad weather would hurt Emmanuel, because I do believe that he is going to get overwhelming support from senior citizens. And I think that is something that is going to be a factor. Number 2, intangible, momentum. That is the last weekend. If, in fact, the media comes up with something, Bernie, where they hit it on Saturday and Sunday, and that becomes the talking point on Monday, if you have that kind of hit, how do you respond? You know, if you're going to sandbag, you sandbag when it really counts. That means when your opponent can't, return fire. And that, I don't know how you predict that. I don't know if that's possible. But certainly, it's a possibility. Outside help, those of you who listen to WGN radio on Wednesday mornings know what I'm about to say. President Clinton and President Obama, those are the best commercials for Emmanuel. And one could only imagine on Sunday night, or Sunday, if by some quirk President Obama wants to check out how his furnace is doing in Hyde Park, and just happens to turn off for a small Emmanuel rally. Early and absentee voting, which really is important with organization. And yes, I do have those numbers, Ms. Wick. There are 8 wards in the city. You know, by the way, just so you know, I think early voting is an absolute disgrace. I mean, of all the things that we do, Roebling, your applause, I now change my view. Sort of like the state's attorney of Will County. Hey, unless you lived in Will County, don't boo or clap. We're 10-year veterans. All right. The fact that you have to wait, go to vote, we all have such busy days, 2 or 3 minutes to vote. My God, how can you spare it? Anyways, early voting. 8 wards have so far, as of Sunday at 5 o'clock. That's the last returns I could get. By the way, today it ends. Jim Allen, are you here? Today it is, right. That's why Jimmy's not here. He's the He's Tom Leach. He's Tom Leach. And it's your birthday, okay. All right, 8 wards had over 1,000 plus absent early votes, led by 41 on the northwest side with 1,582. Trailing them very closely was the Fighting 42nd with 1,483. The other wards that had, now listen to these wards, that had 1,000 plus early votes. 19, it's just southwest side Beverly. 2, otherwise known as the Roosevelt University ward. 23, the Lipinski ward. 43, who would have thought this was going to happen? 6, the old Gene Sawyer ward, which has a hell of an aldermanic race. And my old mentor, Ed Kelly from the Park District, who would have thought the 47th ward now is one of the high turnout wards. Those are the 8 wards that have 1,000 plus. I'll run them again. 41, 42, 19, 2, 23, 43, 6, and 47. Those are the wards that have the most early votes. I say it again, a good, nice weather day will help Emmanuel, because I do believe that there's a good chunk of 41, 42, and 19, those people voting who are senior citizens. Well, what does it all mean as far as the vote? This is something that really is, I take these people's word for it because I think the Chicago Board of Elections does an incredible job, despite what some people might say. I have my eyes fixed, as you all know. It means I have to really stare. In 2003, one of the great elections of all time, does anyone know who ran against Mayor Daley in 2003? This is the only crowd that can get that. Yes, you're right. Your only crowd. There was registered voters, approximately 1,436,000 in the city of Chicago. As of the end of registration in 2011, there's 1,406,000, or a drop of approximately 28,000, or 30,000 voters. Now, that's pretty good when you consider, you know, we lost 200,000 people, we lost 30,000 voters. Makes you proud, doesn't it, to be a Chicagoan? So, hey. Bottom line is that the greatest turnout we ever had was in the '83 primary, 77.5%. I don't think we're going to go anywhere near that. However, on the other hand, in the 2003 election, Daley beat Jakes when the turnout was just over a third. My guess is, and it's only a guess, after chatting with some of the folks who, as you could well imagine, demanded, not requested, demanded to remain anonymous, probably high 50s, low 60s at best. So that's what they're thinking. So if that happens, I ended with the usual cop-out. Where is it coming from? But look, if you need a tout, look at what and the returns are going to come in fast. I mean, really fast. They're going to have those kids there, those 16-year-olds who know nothing about politics, but they know how to work the computer. Bang, 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 boom. They're going to probably, by 8 o'clock, we'll have a winner. So look at those near north side wards, 42, 43, 44, 46, and 48. Not only, last line, then we'll have some questions. I'm sure almost all will be favorable. Not only who's winning against each other, but what is Emmanuel doing against the magic number of 50% plus 1? That's the key. And that's also my talk. Paul, can you read a question? No problem. And you thought being paranoid was a problem. Okay, from Grant Linsky, you think of this on the bike this morning, huh? How will the president's holiday and undecided voters affect the outcome? Well, the president holiday, you know, everything's going to be closed, which under normal circumstances, if there was a good old-fashioned political organization in Chicago, would be a home run with the bases loaded, because now they wouldn't have to take a personal day because all government offices are going to be closed. Now, in the age of reform, where everyone oozes reform out of all their veins, It just runs it runs along the river. It runs into the lake. I'll stop. I don't think it's going to have any effect at all, presidential. But the undecided vote, that last weekend, if people are undecided now, I think the Tribune poll had 15%. If people are undecided, I think that last weekend is a crucial point. Undecideds go that Saturday, Sunday, especially the Sunday papers, crucial. Miss Ginny. A lot of questions, Ginny. From Shelley Holtzman. Shelley's our keeps the books. I won't call him our Jay Guzik. Here we go. Like, only for old Chicagoans, you know, they not Jay Guzik. Pitches for the Cubs. Like economists, please give us your vote percentage predictions for the election. That's a great question. But I don't have to answer it because I am protected too by certain amendments. I don't know. I'll say it again. I do believe Chico will come in second. I can't give you the percentages. The only percentage that counts is can they stop Emmanuel from 50% plus one. If all things are equal as they are now, it's going to be tight. One private, by the way, those private polls you're reading, some private polls are sort of like algebra questions. You give them the answer, and they get you there. Brian, your old boss, used to love those polls, former Attorney General Hardigan. I got to be winning by 10 points, and he'd hire a pollster who got him winning by 10 points. All right. This is from, there seems to be a run, from Keith Koneman, who's a member of the City Club. Did Mike Madigan push a civil union bill through the Illinois legislature in order to knock Reverend Meeks out of the Chicago mayoral election? Do you think I have enough courage to explain what Speaker Madigan is all of? No, I do not. I do not. I don't know. As I was telling the Dawn up here, Speaker Madigan is like a giant onion. You got to keep pulling away layers, and I've never come close to the inner little core. So I don't know, but Reverend Senator Meeks would have been a terrible candidate. Religious leaders don't do well running in elections in Chicago. In fact, religious leaders don't do well trying to influence elections in Chicago. That was a cheap shot, and no one got it. All right. Kent Griffiths from Wolf Point Strategies. Where are you? This a legit operation? Wolf Point was the original, where the Sauganash Hotel was. This was one of the original trading posts in Chicago for all you 1830s, before we became a city. Is there any polling to suggest the direction of preference of the 149 Chicago McCain voters? Roebling? First off, to get them to admit it would be tough. But no, I do think, though, that given the candidates, Emmanuel will do very well with them. But that's just off the top of my, there's no polling on that, not that I know of. Mark, you were here yesterday, small business owner. Mark Wayenmuller, can I find you on Wikipedia? See me afterwards. George Johnson, citizen. I know, George, you're a citizen. Quick opening. Boy, you got me here, George. This is not about pensions. You threw me. Quick opening, Dr. Paul. What's the question? I don't understand it. Oh, the one who she attacked? She will be very Lincoln-esque. She'll be little noted nor long remembered. Is that cruel? Tim Mather, what will change with Rahm as mayor? Where's the rabbi? Get your resume ready. I have... Guy's pretty quick, isn't he? I don't know. It's going to change. But if after our debate on Monday night, it might be tough for Ed Burke to maintain his power. Joe Thornton from the AMA. Does the new census give the new mayor the opportunity to call for reducing the number of wards, not just the aldermanic ward lines? Ward politics, ward and the number of wards. When I started doing research, when I had long hair many decades ago, even before I was married at the University of Chicago, Fighting over the wards was incredible. There was 35 wards with 2 aldermen from each ward. The fighting former alderman of the first ward, Mr. Mazzola, would have had a partner because it was Hinky Dink and Bathhouse in the first ward. Then they went to redistricting. They created 50 wards with 1 alderman. For those of you who don't know this, really back in the day, you would have politics year-round in Chicago because you'd have 2 aldermen per ward, 2-year terms, all party-oriented. So every January you would have a ward convention to get the nominee, then you'd have a primary, then the general election, and when that was finally over, you start all over again. Hell of a time to live in the city. So I'm not sure. Remember, it's the old joke. If you reduce the number of wards, you also reduce the number of aldermen. So I'm not sure anyone want to go there. Speaking of him, Mr. Mazzola from New West Realty. Raise your hand. Just because you're a former alderman, you can still hide back there. Don't you think the mid-high-rise buildings have mitigated the efforts of weather in elections since many, include seniors, don't have to go out? That's a very good question. Why didn't you tell me this prior to what I said? Possible, but not on the northwest and southwest side. Okay. Alderman from Gillswick, on an unofficial, but because you work for Jesse White, we'll let it ride. Aldermanic predictions. I think there'd be a lot of runoffs. And not in those 7 uncontested races. I think that looks good for them. But yeah, I think there are going to be an awful lot of runoffs because these are. We had kids from my dean's here. Well, Columbia College is doing a analysis of the aldermanic races, and like 10 kids called me up yesterday, and I had to use my cheat sheet because I don't know some of these races. I used to know every race. I don't know who are these people running. It's very brand new people. By the way, you can see why I'm on radio. Glibness just comes to me easily. When you look at this Carol Felsenthal wrote this article. This will be good for all you conspiracy people. You'll love this. This is the City Club, right, where conspiracy is our middle name. Watch this. If Emanuel wins on Tuesday, and if he is sitting on $8 to $10 million, and if there are 20 or so aldermanic runoffs, does he go to Thailand, or does he, shall we say, marginally get involved? Ponder that imponderable, and we move on. Judith Reese. Where are you, Judy? Former University of Illinois trustee. Why did Emanuel go after Ed Burke before the election during Monday night's debate? A, I have no inside information. B, what I feel is that it wasn't just a lark, like, oh my God, I think I'll go after him. There has to be something behind it. C, the conventional wisdom is Alderman Burke was one of the people behind the residency fight because, no, I won't say that. I have such a great line about Odelson, but I'm not going to do that because this is the new gentle Paul Green, besides my dean's here. And so I will just simply say that he's calculating. In the old days, you shoot, like with ships, you give a salvo across the bow. I think that was a real salvo to tell Ed Burke, I'm coming after you. Because he did not have to bring that up. He brought it up on his own. That's but again, it was calculated. Last but not last, Carlos Ponce. Where are you, Carlos? All right. Based on your numbers, can you say that participatory democracy in Chicago has declined with the decline of the Chicago machine? Wow, what a great question to end this. Got a half hour? I'll make this brief, somewhat. The greatest turnout of all was '83, that primary with Washington, Daley, and Byrne, the mother of all primaries. Bernie, there wasn't every newscast for the first 8 minutes. That's what newscasts do at 10 o'clock. 8 minutes and a commercial, wall-to-wall politics. Every sign was up, and no neighborhood only had one candidate sign. I mean, if you weren't here then, you just missed the all-time election. 77.5%. Okay. If you go back in time where you had strong parties, the stronger the parties, when we had strong parties, the greater the turnout. As you start diminishing parties, we had people in the 60s called party reformers to diminish the role of political parties, which I thought was a huge mistake, because you could have honest political parties fighting each other, and it gives you an organizational framework by which you can get involved, and you have party platforms. Of course, I'm basically so pro-British when it comes to their manifestos and party. I really love that system because the monarchy throws me off a lot, okay, but parties that stand for something and people running from that party stand for something. I like that. As party power has diminished, so has turnout. Moreover, what has shifted from political parties organizing, it's now money. I gave the line yesterday, which I really shouldn't have. It is now, Brian, pay to say. The Supreme Court has basically come out and said you could spend all the money, using free speech as a cop-out. If you got the money, you could spend it. And no one can stop you because it's the First Amendment. That's pay to say, because media does not give away anything, especially now. So you're going to have a situation where people with money are people who know people with money. Let's face it, Emmanuel's greatest asset is his assets. I mean, that gives him an incredible advantage. So I would think, yes, unless you have a Chicago mayoral election, the turnouts are going to be diminished. There's just no doubt about it. Now, was there bad things about the old system? Yesterday, you had young man, Mr. Alvarez from the Water Reclamation, he just got elected from the fighting 39th Ward, my ancestral home, the home of the Lorinos, Tony and now Marge. My precinct captain always had a high turnout. I will leave it at that. Believe me, leave it at that. But there was something, and I'll end with this. There is a bias in me. I know you're hard to believe. I'm a white line in the middle of the road. But there was something special in my old neighborhood when this precinct captain would come around 1 week before the election. You knew exactly what he wanted. Nevertheless, when my grandmother was with, she would bake, ready for this, those little cinnamon kickles, the top of the line, best because he couldn't embarrass him. No one can make those anymore. He would come there, have his sheet, give the lines for you non-Chicagoans, this is vintage. I really don't care who you vote for, but I really need these two people. And he would be there, and you'd say, my God, what do we care? We don't know who these people are. It was seldom for the only time for president was John Kennedy. He couldn't care less about all the other ones. It could have been some nobody, we didn't know, but there was something that just made you think politically. Here was a man going out at night doing it. It's the old Chicago system. And believe me, it did work, because you got people that would go to vote not because you wanted to show you were a great American citizen, you didn't want to disappoint him. And that really was a tug. Now, was it all one party? Absolutely one party. But it would have been great if there had been a Republican priest doing the same thing. My grandma might not have made the same quality little kickle, but that's beside the point. Remember, it was my grandmother who thought Mayor Daley was one word and got very upset when anyone would run against him, saying those dastardly things against that man. So, yeah, I'm biased on that. I like when people discuss politics. I like when young people discuss politics. And I was going to end by saying, today you have these nitwit bloggers where there is freedom of speech. They go out there, they make off their impartial. That precinct captain who came to our house was far more honest than most of these bloggers. You knew exactly what he wanted. He made no bones about it. All this crap that's on the blog where you have to answer and tweet and all this other stuff, most of them are all biased. They're all biased. They got an end game going. But they make off they don't. And on that happy note, thank you very much. Ginny, where are you?